Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Hi. Hi, Coach. You haven't missed anything yet. Don't worry, King. How excited are you about today's topic? Yes, and the lady of the moment is here. Invite.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Vali, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Vangile?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you as Traversing Liminality. You have no idea. Okay. Especially after last week, Saturday, I think we're excited to share with the rest of the world just the kind of insights that you have.
Thank you, thank you. I'm excited too. I just quickly updated everyone in on my Facebook and other social media accounts. Hi,
Love it.
hey, Cece. I don't know who that is.
Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so before we get carried away and everybody else, doesn't know what's going on, I'm going to introduce who we are, and then I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and then we'll just get right into it. I think we have a solid hour, and we want to make sure that we ask all the questions that we want to ask, and then maybe give people an opportunity to ask questions as well. Is that okay?
Yep, definitely.
Awesome. So, hi, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining. We're super excited to have you. My name is Ntabiseng Makgabo, and I am presenting or representing the 2021 alumni class of Traversing Liminality. Now, Traversing Liminality is a for-purpose organization that is targeted at assisting young Black women aged between the ages of 21 and 30 really move through their lives and move past self-limiting beliefs. Now, I'm a testament of that. It's been a wonderful journey for me, and now we're with the 2022 cohort. But as the 2021 alumni cohort, we had the pleasure of speaking to Vangile Makwakwa last week Saturday, along with Dr. Wendy Luhabi, and we were discussing personal finance. The conversation was so incredible. We felt we can't keep it to ourselves. We have to share. And so Vangile is with us today again. Vangile, hi. Please introduce yourself to everybody
Hi.
else.
Hi guys, my name is Vangile Makwakwa and I am the founder of Wealthy Money. I help women of color heal ancestral money trauma so they can fall in love with their bank accounts, increase income, and live their best lives.
That sounds like such an amazing job. Like, it's absolutely incredible that you do that. I'm going to start
Yeah.
off with, oh, okay, we must pin what the topic is. Let me do that quickly. Okay, so I'm going to pin what our topic is quickly. Um, Mastering your personal finance. Okay, give me one moment. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to pin it. Sometimes technology works and then other times it says no. Okay, it is saying no. I'm trying to pin it. There we go, pin cut. All right,
Okay.
awesome. So we're gonna go straight into the first question. You touched on
Yeah.
how you help women deal with traumas from kind of like emotional or money management. We want to start off with you. You know, how did your childhood influence your relationship with money?
Oh gosh, this feels like so Freudian, but yeah. So how did my childhood influence my relationship with money? Well, let me just say everyone's childhood, absolutely everyone's childhood influences their relationship with money, with the world, with romance, with everything, right? So
Yeah.
for me, I think I had a very jarring experience, right? Because it's not just about money. It's also about everything else that is happening in your life around money, and also about what you're being taught about yourself. So if anyone has read my Instagram account, I talk a lot about growing up in an abusive household, being abused, watching my mother be abused by her family. So a lot of everything that happened was around abuse was with my mom's side of the family, right? So growing up, my mother had, up until the age of 12, I could ask for anything and get it. I didn't have I didn't know that there was such a thing as lack and money issues, because my mom had a boutique. She had pigs. She had like 300 pigs up to one at one point. And one of my retreats, because I turned her house into a retreat center. So she was sharing that when she was getting paid at that point in our lives, she didn't even know, she's a nurse by profession, because her business was making so much money. She didn't even know what date her salary came in, because she never ever needed her salary. She never ever used it. It was just something that came into her bank account, and she never even looked at it. She just did her job because she loved it, but her businesses were what was sustaining her. So she also had boutiques and all this other stuff. So she had many things going, and she was doing really, really well. So at that point, I had this realization that my biggest thing was just the abuse. But what I did notice in the house around me, so as all this was happening, my mom was looking after the family. And
Okay.
what was happening, there was a lot of resentment towards her, right? So there were a lot of like snarky things said about my sister and I, lots of stuff around my mom. So there was always fights within the family around money, because she was feeling like everyone was in her life for the money, and she was expected to support people. And at the same time, she was cutting off people. So there was just a lot going on. Then my uncle came back from exile, and he was a man. Well, not I guess. He was a man, right? And he came back, and my mom had this idea that because he studied in Germany, he studied in all these, in Scotland, in England, in all these countries, and he spoke all these different languages. He was a chess master, and he did a master's in electrical engineering. Then she sat down with him, and she was like, that means that you know more about money than I do, right? And she decided, and I think at the back of her head, well, I know, because I've spoken to her about this, her greatest fear as all this was happening was that she was observing how people in the family were treating her and how they were treating us. So her fear was, if I die, what's going to happen to my children? Like, they'll have to go live with their dad. And that happened anyway. Like, my dad took over in our teens, but I'll explain how that all came to be, right?
Okay.
But in her head, she was like, I don't want my children to go live with their dad's family or with their dad, because my dad had remarried, right? And is still remarried, right, to my stepmom. And so she was like, I need them to stay with my family. So she then made my uncle our legal guardian. And from there, as part of that, she was like, well, since you're going to be taking my kids and you're going to educate them, I am going to sign over all my assets to you. And this is exactly what happened. She signed over all her businesses. The pigs were transported from here, the village where I'm at right now in Tagastad, all the way to Joburg. There were lots and lots of lorries. So everything went. She gave her monies. She resigned, actually, so she could have more money. to do that. And that was her entire thing. And she was like, well, because my uncle has been educated in all these countries, he will definitely do a better job at parenting than her. That's also just like a whole other dynamic. And then my grandmother moved and we all went to Joburg, and my uncle bought this incredible 21-hectare plot with multiple houses on there, and the family all moved, because that's how my mom's family used to roll. I say used to because there's so much that happened, including me, to this family. Like, I was a huge part of that, of what happened to them. And of course they didn't know that when I was being born. But anyway, everyone that, right, well, I don't know if they feel like that. Like, I'm in my next book, I'm talking about money archetypes, and I'm a destroyer. Like, my primary archetype is I destroy things, but on the flip side, I also know how to build things, because the destroyer can also build. But like, yeah, so if I'm like caught in a weird position, I do tend to destroy whatever it is that's going on. But I digress. So we end up at my uncle's place. And at the time, my mom's family operated like everyone, whoever is making the most money is in charge of the whole family. Now, one thing that I want everyone to understand is all my mother's siblings are highly educated. All of them have university degrees or a diploma. None of them do not have a higher education. And when I say none, I really mean none of them. Right? Wow. So these people are educated, they well-spoken, they write well, everything. But for whatever reason, this kind of happened. And I don't think my mom is without fault here, because I think that she was also part of the reason why this happened. So I think when she started making money and everything, she was like, I'll take care of everyone's children, I'll take care of their kids. So all my aunts, uncles, everybody would move in with you. And if you were the one that made the most money, you would then have to take care of groceries, take care of them in some way, take care of their kids, everything. It was, so this is what happened. So when my uncle bought the plot and my mom handed everything over to him, which I think that was her plan also, was that she wanted a break. And so then everybody moved to Joburg. Everybody packed from wherever they were and they moved in with us. And that's why my uncle bought this plot of land with so much land with different houses on it. Yeah. As you can imagine. So then my mother had no more money. So at the age of 12, I started having this realization that there's such a thing as not enough money, right? Yeah. And my uncle, within the first year, what my mom had built and what she gave to him, he had completely demolished it, right? We didn't know then, because there's such a thing as like having an entrepreneurial background, that you need to understand entrepreneurship, that businesses are built with a certain mindset. We didn't understand it. Like, I don't think that generation, my mom's generation, understood entrepreneurial personalities, understood business. It was just, you are educated, you're educated by the white people and in the Western ways, and not even in South Africa. So that means that you know everything, you know. So then you get the status in the family. And that's what happened. And looking back, I think a lot about this. I think my uncle also was then pushed in this position. So he didn't know how to say, I don't know, because then everybody was all over him, loving him, supporting him, because they thought he had lots of money, right? Plus, he's an electrical engineer. He was one of the directors of Sportnet/Transnet at some point. So he was making a lot of money, right? So then what I experienced in my teens, I go from consistently having things and wanting things. And mind you, up until that age as a child, you don't really want many things. All I wanted was my grandmother, right? Like, it was like, just give me my maternal grandmother and my life is cozy and great. We go on vacation, and I was that child, even like, we'd be going on vacation. Like, I remember we went to Cape Town with my dad and my mom, and I was like, I just want my grandmother. I'm done with this vacation. Like, take me home. Like, right? That was always me, you know? And then you get to your teens, that changes. That's when suddenly money becomes important, right? That's when you suddenly realize that people are going on to movies, friends are going ice skating, things are happening. And now I'm hearing there's not enough money. Not only was there not enough money, remember my mom's quit her job. She's given everything to my uncle, all that stuff. There's not even enough money for food for us. And the crazy thing is we're going to private schools and my dad is paying for all that, right? So that's how my dad ended up coming, like having to take over a lot of our education and everything. Because my mom then went from, I don't want this man as part of my children's life, you know, he can just come visit, but you know, that kind of pride, to I have to go to him and tell him what is going on, and then he needs to really take over. And that's exactly what happened. But on the day-to-day side of things, I was still dealing with this. And whenever my uncle would get paid, it would be a feast. So he would get his salary, and it would be, we'd have celebrities and politicians. Some of the top celebrities and politicians in this country have been to my uncle's place, and they would be like having a blast, parties nonstop until the money ran out. So by the 5th day after my uncle got paid, he'd be asking my grandmother, who was a pensioner, about money and for money for groceries, to pay electricity, to pay buy to buy petrol. I almost said gas, right? So like, to buy petrol so that we could get to school. Things were bad. So imagine you've just had this feast, and then famine for days, and then like again. So this was like my entire teen life. There was never any stability around money. So for me, and as all this is happening, now that my mom has lost her money, there was so many family fights, and people were fighting with her. Nobody wanted her. Like some family members have only seen my mother's house for the first time now in maybe 30 years. Actually, no, I lie. So maybe it's about 28, 27 or 26 years. Yeah. So about the first time in 26 years, last week Saturday, because she became a pariah because she didn't have any money, right? So it was all that. And so then also there were talks about like, will your children ever succeed? So growing up hearing that, because I mean, how will they ever make it? You can barely buy groceries. You can barely afford to give them food. So going from having everything to losing money can be one of the biggest traumas, right? It's like, it's very traumatic because it's almost like an abandonment trauma when it comes to me, right? But not only that, but watching that, seeing how someone is rejected when they have money, because that started happening to my uncle, right? Like when you have money, you're criticized about how you use it, that you're not doing enough for the family. But these are grown adults with degrees and diplomas, right? Everybody that's an adult in that house has had a higher education of some sort, but you're criticized for not doing enough. And then when you don't have money, you're criticized for losing it, and you're called useless, not good enough. A lot of verbal abuse, and sometimes a lot of violence being used with that. And my mother at some point was using, instead of paying our school fees, she was using her money to pay for my cousin's school, college fees, because she was scared that she would be further rejected, right? So all this stuff is happening, and there's a lot of violence around money, a lot of emotional, verbal, physical violence going on. And at the same time, as a child, I'm like witnessing this like abandonment of money, and realizing that, like, you know, there's a difference when you have money and when you don't have money, and how people treat you in the world. So all those traumas are very subtle traumas, but some of them are big traumas with a capital T. Some of them are small traumas with a capital T, with a small t, but they all shaped how my relationship with money played out. So it was no wonder when I became an adult, and I moved out of home at 17, and I started working and paid my way through UCT. I held down 3 jobs. Yeah. So I held down 3 jobs. I also helped my sister pay for her schooling, not her university though, just like for high school and then beauty school and things like that. So it was really, really intense because even then my relationship with money was one of feast and famine. One, because I had learned how to I had co-regulated to dysregulated nervous system. So I had co-dysregulated to to my maternal family's nervous system when money was concerned. So as children, what often happens is that when adults are dealing with anything, we are co-regulating to them at all times, right? And I talk a lot about co-regulation, right? And what happens is that as my uncle was having the feast and famine of all that with money, I was actually tapping into his nervous system and how he felt about money and what was going, and that dysregulation around money. So we thought my uncle was very irresponsible with money, but what it was, looking back, was a sense of deep unsafety because he couldn't win. He couldn't win if he had money. If he had money, he had extra responsibilities. He was expected to look after the family. If he had no money, he was not good enough and he was abused. So obviously his nervous system was always going from one extreme to the next because because he's trying to find a center in a place where there is no center and trying to feel safe. So what I then regulated to as a child when it came to money was this anxiety and unsafety around money. So whenever I had money, it was feast and famine for me. And most times I was trying to get rid of money as fast as possible, just like my uncle was.
Yo, that is an incredible story. And, you know, there's so many topics that you touched on, from the feast and famine to the impact of black tax and how it really changed and shaped you. We're going to touch on black tax a little bit more later on. But that's an incredible, incredible story. And just, I love how you are able to speak your story without any fear or favor. So thank you for being so vulnerable with us.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, right? We know that you then at some point in your life accumulated about $60,000 in debt. Now, how do you think all of that you went through shaped your relationship with money first? And how do you think you first experienced debt, and then how you managed to then get out of that big debt that you had accumulated then when you were, I think you said you had accumulated it before you were 30?
Yep. I had accumulated this debt actually so by the time I was 26, I was already like $60,000 in debt. So I started having panic attacks between the ages of 26 and 28 whenever I had to manage money and hold money. I really couldn't deal with money or even touch money for 2 years. So for 2 years, I didn't earn any money because the idea of talking about money would send me over the edge. Like my entire nervous system would rebel and my body stopped fully digesting food. Like I had a lot of physical ailments, which I share that like a lot of people that follow me on social media will notice that I do copious amounts of self-care, right? Like I do a lot of massages. I'm a yoga teacher. I do a lot of work with the body. Part of why I do so much somatic healing, and I looked into trauma with when it comes to how the body holds on to trauma and processes trauma, comes from that, because I started getting sick and the panic attacks were just the first step until I just was suicidal and could no longer get out of bed. Right. And part of how all this happened is it's all tied to my childhood. Right. So I was already depressed and in therapy by the time I was 14 because so much was happening in my environment. And as a child, again, you co-regulate to your caregivers, right? To their nervous system. So if your caregivers are completely dysregulated, they completely dysregulate your nervous system as a child, right? Yeah. So I almost had no choice, you know? So at the end of the day, so by the time I was 14, I was falling apart. I was already having suicidal thoughts. It was a hectic thing. My school was very involved in my mental health, right? They were very involved in my emotional stuff. My psychologist was the go-between between my teachers and just my life because I couldn't cope. But so basically for me, all those underlying things were already there, right? So it's just like when I graduated from my MBA program, something pivotal happened that then contributed to this. My uncle called me and he congratulated me and said, "Congratulations, you have now you've now graduated with an MBA from the US. Please come home and come look after the family." So I have just graduated from the MBA, and he literally said, "It is now your turn."
Yeah.
I was like, how is this my turn? This has destroyed all of you, right? So now I've just graduated and I have to put this boundary in place, and I have to then start to talk about, like, basically cement my complete dissociation from the family. Never mind that I left home at 17 and I hadn't spoken to my maternal family since then. But here they are calling, here my uncle was calling 8 years later because he and I had kept in touch. And he's saying this. I instantly got triggered. I didn't have the tools, right? So everything that I'd spent my life running from, part of why I had the 3 jobs and everything was, I didn't want to owe anyone anything. So that I could say, you know what, I don't owe anyone anything from going through UCT and getting my degree. I wanted that for my sister too. So we can truly say, okay, no, we've done it with the help of friends and with ourselves, right? Because the fear that I always had was that then I would be asked to come back home. So the $60,000 in debt comes from, I went and I got a 1/3 scholarship from my MBA program from the Simmons School of Management. Then I got a 1/3 loan and a 1/3 gifted money from my dad. So in total, the MBA cost about 600,000 Rand at the time, right? So I ended up with $30,000 in debt, and then I took on another sum for living expenses. I then took on another $10,000 or thereabouts, and then the rest was after I graduated from the MBA program. So my uncle had triggered me, and I kid you not, all the job interviews that I was in the process of getting fell through. Nothing came together after that. My finances fell apart, and a huge part of that is because even though parts of me wanted financial stability and wanted to earn a living, the other parts of me were invested in protecting me. So my inner teen was very invested in protecting me and keeping me safe. So she did everything she could, energetically and otherwise, to make sure that no money would come in, because at least you have an excuse, right? Is that I don't have a job, I don't have money. So even though I'm saying that I don't want to look after you guys, love me still, because it's not my fault. I don't have a job. So this is how my inner teen protected me. So if there's one thing that I want people to understand, is that when it comes to trauma, it is very layered, and our sub-personalities have different agendas. So adult me can want something, but teen me or 4-year-old me could be running the show. And the minute I got triggered because I didn't have the tools, literally my inner teen hijacked me for years so that I couldn't earn money, right? So what did I do instead? I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in the US also because it's safer than coming back home, because if I'm home, I'm more accessible, right? So suddenly, and if I don't have it's like doomed if you don't, doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. Doomed if I don't have a job, doomed if I do have a job, because if I don't have a job, I'm going to be compared to all my peers. I'm going to be made to feel horrible. So I decided to stay in the US, and I started a company. And obviously no money was coming in because, like I said, my inner teen was completely protecting me. So all my vows of rebellion, vows of loyalty, vows of service, all my various vows came fully to the fore. Could not make money for years, and I built my company on credit cards, and that's how I ended up $60,000 in debt. And when my company did once in a while make a sale, and I ended up teaching, I did get a part-time job. I ended up working for the Saudi royal family, where I was making bank, like so much money for very, very little work. Every time, can I tell you, every time, like I would make like $1,000 to $1,500 for something like 10 to 15 hours of work a week.
Wow.
And every time, and every time I would make this money, that's when my panic attacks really went all the way crazy. And then the money just stopped flowing at some point. And that's another conversation for another day of how when we are seriously triggered and in the midst of a hijack, money can be fully blocked. And this
Yeah.
is how trauma and ancestral trauma plays out, especially if there are vows involved, right?
Mhm.
So I was making a lot of money, and it was a lot more money than my nervous system could handle and work with. So what did I do every time I got paid? Almost every Friday, I would do what I'd seen my uncle do, because what else had I learned about money? So I
Mm.
had like all this debt, $60,000 in debt. I literally, within 60 weeks, I could have been almost debt free or cut that
Yeah.
debt in half, right? But I didn't. Why is that? Because I was busy giving away the money. So if you've ever watched Inventing Anna, or you've seen The Tinder Swindler, trust me, it's very real. Or you've seen I Blew It. This is what's happening, because the money was coming in. My nervous system couldn't hold it. It went beyond my receiving set point. My inner teen at this point is invested in trying to protect me. So having
Mhm.
money means that the family can come and ask you to look after them. And looking after the family comes with violence and unsafety. So how do I keep myself safe? By never having money. So how do I never have money? I get rid of money. So I overgive money, and I basically buy things I don't need, cannot stick to a budget. I don't even know where that money went, to be perfectly frank. If you ask me what happened to all that money, I have no clue, because I definitely made way more than $60,000 in 60 weeks or even 80 weeks, but I cannot account for that money for the life of me. Like I had to get rid of it. There was no other way. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so for me, and this is how I stayed in debt, got into debt. Oh, I should also say that I was using debt. I was using credit cards to travel. And I learned all about the beauty of credit cards and debt when I graduated from UCT, because everybody wants to give finance graduates and all these other graduates credit cards and trap us in debt.
Mhm.
So I took on the credit cards because they told me that I could use, the bank told me that I could use credit cards to travel. And I believed them. So by the time I finished my MBA program, I'd already been well entrenched in this credit card
Mhm.
history and story, and I'd had credit cards in almost every country I lived. So my debt was denominated in pounds, rands, and US dollars.
Yo, yo, that's incredible. You've touched on so many important topics, from how the body keeps score when you were younger and your body was failing and you were in
Mm,
therapy as a younger person, to how if you don't heal your inner child, she
yeah.
runs your life, and how she
Yep.
effectively ran your life and protected you when you were in the US. One other topic that is kind of like the golden thread is black tax, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's talk about that. Obviously we
Let's
know
talk
now
about
that black tax
it.
has completely like affected you. Um, how would you say, somebody who is starting out as a young professional should navigate black tax? Just given the lessons that you've learned, what do you think is the best way to move about it and not avoid it, but rather manage it?
Mm, first things first is to decide what it is that you want, right? So
Mm,
as you're earning your money, what is it that you want? How do you want to relationship with people? I think one of the things that nobody ever teaches us is that we get to decide how we relationship with people. So
yeah.
do you want your relationships to be defined by money, or do you want to get validation? Because I think in our families, there does tend to be this thing that the person who drives the biggest car, who has the biggest house, who has all the money, gets the most respect, right?
Yes.
Because there's this expectation expectation that you will then also be supportive. And so what often happens for most of us is we get trapped in that cycle that, oh, if I want the family love and support and I want to be respected and given that validation in the family, I need to have all these things and I need to look like I've got it together. So this is why so many of us, especially Black women, we feel so alone. You'll be heavily in debt, but you don't know how to say no to people because you realize that part of your relationships are based on the fact that people perceive you as having your ish together, on having it together and having money. And so it gives you some kind of status and title in the relationship, right? So I can only share what I've done, right? So what I then did was when I got back from the US, I was like, I decided to come back home. I was like, I started working after working a year on my trauma and my nervous system. I hired coaches and I started developing my own body of work. I was like, I think it's time to go back home and face the fire, just go there, set the boundaries. And what I did was I came back and I just told people my full story. I was like, listen, I have no money, I have no debt. And people were like, aren't you going to buy a car so that people can see you, like buy a BMW where people can see that you come from the US, you studied there. I was like, I'm getting myself an Opel Corsa, and I had that car up until last year when I sold it. Right? I was like, I'm getting myself a tiny little black Opel Corsa. I'm going to be great, not getting into debt. I'm busy paying off my debt. I'm still, because I came home and I'd only paid off about $10,000 in debt, but I was so excited because I'd never been able to pay off debt before. So I was like, I'm on this journey of paying off debt, people the truth and just set my boundaries with people and then decided how I was going to help people. So when people were coming to me and asking for help, I was very honest. I was like, I'm not for that, because what my sister and I had done when I was busy helping her, I had said to her, I'm going to help you up until you graduate from high school. When you come to university, when you come and you do your advertising diploma at your college, you're going to come through and you're going to get a job and hold down your side of the deal and you're going to get a scholarship. And it worked out like that, right? And then I was like, when she wanted to travel as well, I was like, I'll buy you a car so that you can use that car, because I was traveling and earning US dollars. So I said, I'll buy you a car. And that car has two reasons why I bought it, right? Is that she could get around with that car. And the second reason was that she could also use the car to sell. She could sell that car and use that money to go to the UK when she decided to travel. And that's exactly what she did. So there was always an end goal. There was always, when I worked with my sister, there was always, this is how we're going to work together. This is what I'm going to do. This is how long I'm going to do it for. And this is the end goal. Let's have a conversation. So when I got back home, I instituted the same kind of, rules. I don't want to call them rules, but same kind of value system, which is that I then decided that I'm going to work with people, and instead of giving money, I'm going to work with people so that they are empowered, and I will share my journey and I'll be open and I'll share whatever's happening, and we'll figure out how do I help you in such a way that I am never needed again to help you. Because I realized that a huge part of my uncle and my mom's story isn't just that the family was abusive, is that they were also getting their emotional fix by helping the family, because everybody was validating them. Everybody was coming to them. They were the center of things. When there were funerals, they got to be front and center. When there's weddings, when there's anything, they got to be front and center. So it also worked for them emotionally. So I was like, I am going to work on myself so that I am genuinely never needed. So people never ever have to come to me for anything. So people are their own people and they're fully empowered, and I get nothing from them in terms of emotional validation or whatever. So people just love me for loving me. And that's exactly what my family relationships have been like, So I've lost some people along the way. People thought that I was awful and mean, etc. But along the way, I've gained so many great relationships with family. Like I've watched my aunt, my dad's younger sister, become debt-free, take early retirement, build back rooms. Even yesterday, we were talking about her real estate journey. She's been doing it. I've seen my cousins go through the same. I've been watching people do nothing to do with me. I'm just sharing the
Mm,
journey and I'm space. And I just decided that instead of giving, I will help in such a way that someone is empowered and I am never ever needed. Because for me, that is true giving and true empowerment is when the person that is asking for help never ever needs you ever again, so that they can continue to fish and, you know, do their own thing without you in the midst of anything. So I generally don't get a lot of calls. Like, never actually, where people are like, this is what I need, etc., because we talk about this long before.
yeah. So you've created very good and very healthy money boundaries. Thank you, Coach Natemba, for that line. You've created a money boundary. And I think
Yes.
that's a very critical and very beautiful thing to do because it shows self-love to yourself, but it also
Yeah.
shows self-love to or love to your family because to your point,
Yeah.
you help them empower themselves so that they're not reliant on you in the future.
Exactly, because I think
Mm,
part of the resentment also builds when people feel like everything that they have to do for their lives, they need you. So it becomes
mm,
this resentment because whoever wants to keep asking for another person for anything. So even with
mm,
my mom, when I realized that she was going to retire and she had this house, I was like, well, I'm just going to help finish renovating your house because you've already done it halfway. Let me come finish it off. And then you get to do with this house as an asset whatever you want. You get to rent it out to people for retreats. You get to rent it out
mm,
for weddings. You get to do whatever so that it's not about me, because it's like, I could only imagine, because my greatest fear, when what I saw with my grandmother, what my mom and my uncle did with her, right, is that she then looked after us, but then she was earning her pension money, but then they would do for her. There was no salary where she felt fully empowered, right?
mm,
And for me, I was like, I never want that. I'd rather have my mom make her own money, do her own things, where she always feels that this is her place. Because the other thing that I see is that when we then take over and we renovate properties, our parents' houses, then like you're given a special place in the family home and you're treated specially. And it's almost like your mom feels like she is beholden to you. For me, my
yeah.
mom has kicked me out of her house several times, even though I've renovated it. My sister too. We've been kicked out several times. And I used to get upset about that. But then I've realized that no, she fully
Mm,
owns this place. This is
yeah,
hers. And
yeah.
when you help someone and when you do for someone, you want to make sure that they still maintain their sense of self empowerment. So,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So, even when I work with my clients, I always say, if your mother's looking after your children, pay your mother. Pay your mother the same fee as you would pay a nanny. Not that
Mm,
just, even if she's living in your house and you're paying for groceries, you would do all that with a nanny,
yeah.
right? So, all these things. And that's a way of making sure that, like, they also feel like they are doing something of value and something that is extremely valuable, because that is labor, and that is labor that
Mm,
should be paid for and would be paid for if it was another person, right? So
mm,
I'm very big on that. If your mom is cleaning your house, pay her a fee, the fee that you would pay a cleaner. You know,
mm,
there's none
mm,
of this, oh no, it's my mother, I'm looking after her. No, because every human being wants to feel like they are making some kind of money and that they have control over that money, and they never have to ask another person for help in any way. They can, and even if they do ask for help, that they have the ability to repay that help
mm,
financially in some way.
mm.
So this is about preserving someone's sense of power and their own sense of human dignity.
I love that. I love that. And it also works in terms of removing the need to get an emotional fix. Bali spoke about that earlier on. Just removing and cutting off that reliance on that
Mm.
feeling. Well, that's what that does. That's beautiful. And I hope people are taking notes because hey, this is gold, guys. This is gold. Um, I want to just go off tangent a little bit and then just ask you about the difference between saving and investing, right? And the difference between saving and investing, particularly when you are in debt, you know. And we can just take it back to you when you had just cleared off 10,000 rands or $10,000 worth of debt. Um, what did you think about saving and investing at that point in time? And what was the first thing that you did? Did you save first? Did you invest first? Did you finish off your debt first? How did you navigate on that?
Okay, so the first thing I did when I was doing debt was I did both when I was paying off my debt. And there's a
Okay.
reason for that, right? And then later, after the $10,000, I actually got my financial advisor, Shanine, whom I've interviewed several times because, as I keep saying, that woman has done the Lord's work with me, right? So, like, I
Love that.
mean, she met me. So let me just start by saying that when I met Shanine, the only amount of money that I could invest was 200 Rand a month. This is how much I had left over after paying off debt. And we started with that. We've built an investment portfolio where, like, I can't believe it. A few weeks ago, I think it was in January in Cape Town, we sat down and she was like, oh, wow, okay, your retirement annuity will be about 6 million by the time you get to 55, to the age
Wow.
of 55. I'm like, I can't believe that we're here, and that's just retirement annuity. Like, now I've got endowment policies that pay out in lump sums every few years. I've got unit trusts, all the stuff. So I started off by saving and paying off debt. And the reason for that was, for me, I realized that I still had my feast and famine moments, right? And to be honest, when I'm fully triggered, I can still go into those moments. But the
Mm-hmm.
difference now is that my feast and famine moments will last a few days. They don't go for weeks or months. It's like I
Okay.
will catch myself because I've got the tools. I'll be like, whew, okay. So I'll be like, oh, okay. And then, like, the money doesn't have to fully drain out of my account. I'll just, like,
Yeah.
spend a few thousand Rand somewhere and I'll just be like on this. And then in, like, literally 3-4 days, I catch myself and I'm able to be like, okay, let's do the work, because I've developed the tools particularly for myself and for my clients, specifically for these moments, right? But when I started off by saving, because I realized what would happen was that I would pay off debt, right? And then an emergency would arise. And then I would have to then use my credit cards to pay for an emergency because I didn't have savings. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to work a lot on my emotions, especially the impatience and the frustration of me when I wanted to be debt free instantly, which was, I wanted, when I first started, what would keep me in the cycle of debt was I would just use all my salary to pay off debt, and then I would have no money to live, no money to do anything, right? So I was like, no, that's not going to happen. So I created an extra stream of income. I got a part-time job, and then I started building the business and using all the money from the business to pay off my debt, right? And my money from my salary from the part-time job, I used for day-to-day living. So that was to cover my rent, petrol, going out. I didn't stop going out. So as I was paying off debt, I was like, I've had a blast throughout, because of the multiple streams of income. Like, I was out, I was doing weekend getaways, I was living like someone who had a salary and no debt because I had an extra stream of income just dedicated to paying off debt. And that's what
Yeah.
I did. So with my salary, that's when I started with the saving of 200 Rand a month, like with the investing of 200 Rand a month. And then, like, I put aside 100 Rand in my unit trust. That is so crazy when I think about this, right? Because this was in 2013. And, like, things have really started to build things started to build. So, so I was saving and investing and also paying off debt. But I think for me, the game changer was that I had an extra stream of income. So I'm a big believer in extra streams of income. Even right now in my businesses, what I'm doing as I'm building my property portfolio, because I've decided I want to build my property portfolio using cash. I'm not interested in taking out home loans and mortgages. I could definitely refinance one property, right? But what I want to do is I want to do cash. So what I've
Mm-hmm.
done is I've started looking at the different income streams that the business makes, and I'm allocating two income streams from the business to say this will go towards property. One is already working with the property income stream. It's already making money from the property business. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But one is within Wealthy Money where I'm like, okay, this income stream, this one is going to go towards being put aside for property, and that's how I'm going to build the property portfolio. And the rest of the money can be used to continue to pay me a salary and do other things in the business and scale the business. But I'm a big, big believer in multiple streams of income.
You touch on a couple of very important topics that I want to ask you questions on right now, right?
Yeah.
And the first is budgeting versus a money manifesto. Now, on Saturday, you told us about what a money manifesto is, and I'd love for you to tell the audience what a money manifesto is. But I want to know, or I'd like for you to share with the audience, what is the difference between the two, and how does one then develop the discipline to dig themselves out of debt well, like to live like you did and not kind of beat themselves up and punish themselves in the process of pulling themselves out of debt, but to rather use a money manifesto or a budget to do that and to do that well. And then the next thing I want to touch on is property. But let's answer the first question.
Okay, so a money manifesto. So I don't use the word budget, right? And I don't believe in self-discipline. As you guys can hear, I was paying off debt and going on weekend getaways and going to incredible. I was eating out every single day when I became debt-free, right? As I was paying off debt. Like anyone that knows me right now, I usually have a private chef in whatever country I'm in. I eat out all the time. I don't even bother with cooking. I refuse this whole notion of having to shrink yourself, which is the traditional stance on budgeting, which is whatever you make, less your expenses, and then you live off, you only have fun with whatever is left over. I'm like, recipe for disaster. And I say this because if you think about what we're doing here, I want you guys to parallel this with diet culture. What is the difference between diet culture and budget culture? Because it's really the same thing, but one uses food, the other uses money, right? Which is all about deny, 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 discipline, 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 use willpower, use willpower, use willpower. Here's what happens, because the reason why diets don't work and the reason why many people, myself included, I would have a budget and halfway through the month, I would like be strict on the budget. And then one day, halfway through the month, I'd pass by a shop, I'd pass by TJ Maxx or whatever when I was in the UK or the US, and I'd be like, oh my gosh! In the US, I used to love Marshalls, and I'd pass by Marshalls, and I'd be like, I need a new pair of shoes. I need new handbags. I've been so good. I've been so disciplined. I deserve a reward. And I would go in there and self-care, right? And instead of getting that one handbag, you know what would happen? I would walk out of there with a trolley full of clothes. And this would be a cycle. Every month it would be like that. And don't we do that with diets? I've been so good on this diet. I've eaten salads for like weeks on end. I deserve a chocolate cake. And like 3 days of binge eating later, you're like, wow, okay, that went south really fast.
Very quickly.
Right? And the reason for that is because people have been taught to use willpower. Let's get this straight, guys. Willpower is limited. There is such a thing called decision-making fatigue. What economists and behavioral economists have found is that we get exhausted from making decisions and from using willpower. So if throughout the day I have to keep reminding myself, eat a salad, eat healthy, do this, drink water, don't drink the Coke, don't do this, don't do that, or you're on a budget, you can't use this money, you can't do that, you need to pay off debt. The mind gets exhausted. So by the end of the day, you actually you're less likely to be within your willpower. This is why if you've been on a diet, this is exactly why by the end of the day, you're most likely to binge eat. Why like 12 midnight, you wake up and you're like, It's because your willpower has completely been depleted and your mind is exhausted. So budgets don't work.
Mm,
So what I then created instead, and what I teach people, is a spending manifesto. So this is
okay.
a spending plan that you have that also includes your investments, your savings, all that, but it is in alignment with your values. So I do not teach people not to buy the expensive handbag. I'm like to people, well, if you want the expensive handbag, get it. If it aligns with your values, go get the expensive handbag. If you want to go on a weekend getaway 5 times in a month, go for it, for every
Mm,
single weekend in March, and you want to do that, but have it on your spending manifesto, right? So
yeah.
it's spending in alignment with your values. And what that does is we're taking away willpower altogether, and we're saying you are getting the things that you truly want. And something incredible happens then. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's an energetic thing as well. Money, it's almost like money stretches to cover all those things. So what I've seen has been incredible. I've worked with thousands of people in my course, the Bank Account Challenge, and especially when I was still doing it for free before it became a course. It's like I've seen people completely change their spending habits, start saving, start doing everything. Why? Because your mind, it's kind of like the difference between diet culture and lifestyle change, where
Love it.
you're not chasing the number on the scale, but you're just slowly making small changes towards a healthier lifestyle until you're fully having a healthy lifestyle, and that becomes your life. It's a way of
Mm,
living. This is diet culture, which never works, where you gain back the weight. Same with the spending manifesto. You're not gaining back the debt. You're not recreating the
mm,
debt. You're not making yourself feel better. And as for the emotional part, right? So that is the huge part, right? So you talked about how was I able to do this? A lot of that is working on my trauma, right? So a lot of what I've been speaking about actually isn't so much the practical stuff, if you listen to me, right? A lot of it is healing my trauma, right? Firstly, I had to feel safe. I had to work with my nervous system so that I could start regulating my nervous system when money was concerned. So I could stop panicking about money, so that I could actually sit down long enough to write down the numbers for the spending manifesto, so that I could be honest enough with myself and say, oh, there is a shortfall here. I'm not, because of my many values and love of things and all that, I have a shortfall of X amount every month. So how do I fix this shortfall? And I always
mm,
say to people, the answer to fixing the shortfall is not to cut more things, because then you're going to shock your nervous system again, right? So
yeah.
the conversation is about how can I increase my income? So being calm enough and having a regulated nervous system, having a regulated enough nervous system that I could sit down and come up with an income strategy on how to increase my income, create an extra stream of income so that I can cover the shortfall and I can do all this other stuff. So a lot of that has been doing a lot of the inner work, and a lot of that is stuff that I have my own exercises and meditations that I've created and that now I
Love
teach my
that.
clients and help them with, right? So that's
Mm,
what I've been doing a lot of. And and this is daily work. I don't want to lie, because like I said, I still get triggered whenever I get to South Africa, being around certain family members. Someone can say something really small and I can completely get triggered, and
yeah.
it can trigger a deep trauma and it can spiral me. And as I spiral, I get hijacked by my inner child and my inner teen. But the beauty is that I've got the tools, because
Mm,
it's constant work. It's inner work. And I say to people, we know that we need to stay healthy. We have to go to gym every day
mm,
and eat every day. We know that if we're in a romantic relationship, we need to work on the romantic relationship every day, right? But
mm.
why do we think that with money it's a once-off thing? We don't have to
Ooh,
do the daily work as well. And yet we're handling money every single day. We're paying for
mm,
things. We're buying things. We're gifting people things. So everything, we're dealing with money every single day. So this needs to be daily work as well. And no, affirmations and visualizations do not cut it, because that is not targeting trauma. That is not the work on trauma. Trauma lives in the body. You need to involve the body when dealing with trauma. So it's all about working with our different sub-personalities, sometimes going into past lives, working with our ancestors. That is huge, 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 especially with our history of black tags, helping healing that ancestral trauma, because it's not just about our ancestors healing us, it's us healing our ancestors as well. This is a symbiotic relationship, right? So it is consistent, because as we're expanding, we're getting triggered in different ways.
You have no idea. I don't know if you can see the comments, but the comments are going wild. I mean, when you kind of put the juxtaposition between what a spending manifesto is versus a lifestyle change in your diet, everybody was like, what? That is incredible. That is gold. So thank you so much for sharing, but also thank you to everybody who keeps on like putting in comments and is interacting with each other. I love it. I love it. I love it. We see you. We appreciate you. We're going to do our best to get to some of the other questions, but thank you for interacting. We love it. Okay, we love it. Now, people have been asking me about how you got the extra stream of income. I'm sure there were many, but I specifically want to touch on the property one, right? We know that property was historically inaccessible to Black women as an asset class.
Yeah.
But how did you pick this asset class as the investment tool for you? And how have you gone about investing? You know, there are lots of things that people are not aware of when it comes to investing in property that can affect their cash flow. And that can be things like rates and taxes, that can be SARS, investing in specific vehicles, investing personally in property. Walk us through your journey in property and why you picked that as an income tool, and if there are better streams of income that people can actually be thinking of instead of just property.
Yeah, like, I mean, my extra streams of income have always been my business, right? That have not had to do with property. Property is a recent addition. Property is something that I really fully got into, although I've been making income on property since 2015. My property in Cape Town was already making me money, and I had a tenant in there. So, but I didn't really become serious about property as a stream of income until 2019, right? So that was, even though I was making money from that, I was like, my business is doing the most and it's doing well. So that has always been my top focus, was entrepreneurship for me, and I love it.
Okay.
Like services, launching services. So I've been coaching. I have my online courses, books, but mainly just coaching, online courses. I do group coaching, and I do international retreats as well, right? So that's been my extra streams of income. And when I started, though, when I was in debt and I had the part-time job, these streams of income that I'm mentioning were not the extra streams of income. I was actually doing financial literacy speaking and blogging. So I was getting paid as a writer and to blog for people. And I was also doing financial literacy speaking. And I still make money from my blog, which is actually super, super cool. So that's another stream of income. So people pay me to actually blog on my own blog. So that's been really, really cool. It's just been through a series of different people that I've met in different countries. So I don't know if it's a thing with companies in South Africa, but no South African company has ever paid me to do that. So it's been mainly Australian, UK, Canadian, and American companies that have done that. So that's been really, really cool. But in terms of property, how I got into property actually was a friend of mine in the UK. His name is John Griffith. And he messaged me one day out of the blue and was like, we haven't spoken in at least a year or two. How are you? So I was like, oh, I'm in Thailand. How are you doing? I'm like exploring Southeast Asia at the moment. And he was like, we should hop on a Zoom call. We should chat. I'm into property now. And I was like, okay, cool. So we hop on a Zoom call, and all he wanted to do was talk about property. And I was like, this is so interesting how you're making money in property and how you're just talking about how you're creating passive income and you're getting into retirement, how you're going to retire through property, can I invite you to the Money Magic student group, which is the Money Magic course is one of my courses where I teach people how to create a consistent stream of income of 40,000 Rand a month in their businesses or $2,500 every month in their businesses, and then how to scale that, right? But starting from that amount. So he was like, yeah, cool. So I was like, yeah, my people are making money as they in the course, they're building businesses, they're creating extra streams of income, and they're constantly asking me, what do they do with this now extra this extra income that they're making? And this was a conversation that people were constantly messaging me about. And I was like, I've done enough, I feel like, why are you now asking me about investing and why this has to happen? So I was like, this sounds like a great idea. Let me invite John. And so he came, and then my co-host for the Property Magicians podcast, Dr. Miranda, right? And you guys can find her on prop.mom. She then was in the class and she listened to this. Then they insisted, then the Money Magic students insisted that I bring John back, and he came back and we had another conversation. And then Nizo started listening to Bigger Pockets podcast, which John had told us about. On the and Bigger Pockets is all about Americans and property investing in the US. So we started listening to that podcast and we got obsessed. We were like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So throughout 2017 and 2018, we're listening to this podcast. And then at some point in 2018, I was like, we're going to start our own podcast. And then I woke up one day in September. I was living in Penang, Malaysia at the time. I didn't even have a laptop because my laptop had blown up when I was in Thailand. It had like caught fire. That's a story for another day as to why that happened, as I was introducing a new stream of income. And so I only had my cell phone, and I'd been working on my cell phone throughout. So when I got to Penang, I was like, let's do this. And then we just launched this the Property Magicians podcast. We didn't know anyone in property, not a single soul. I knew one person, Tina, right? Because she was the only person that I knew in South Africa that spoke about property. And now we are like 115 episodes in on the Property Magicians podcast. We've been featured on Finance Week. We're in the top 20 business and investing segment in the in South Africa, on iTunes and other podcast platforms, and we're in the top 15 business and investing in Botswana as well. So like the podcast then just started to grow, and we just decided, you know what, we'll take this thing as far as we can, and we'll see if there's a market for property in South Africa, if there's people doing property investing. And we decided that we're just going to predominantly, I think we've maybe interviewed 6 people that are not Black on that podcast in 115 episodes. Yes, so we just went and we found Black people from all over the world. They came through and they've just been sharing about their property investing journey. And of course, through that, as you're asking the questions, you then start to learn about property, right? Some of your guests become your friends. They start messaging you. They start telling you things. They start wanting to go on the journey with you. So this is how I then got into property. It was literally John just dragged me out of my slumber. I think at the time when he messaged me, I was in Bali and I was like busy climbing volcanoes and all sorts of things, and had no interest in property whatsoever. I mean, like, my property was making me money in Cape Town. And then one thing led to another. We now have the Wealthy Ones property stock file. In the first 5 or 6 months of the existence of the stock file, we raised like 2 million Rand. We're in the process of investing in our 4th property deal for 17% return per annum. Actually, today, as I talk, we're in the process of transferring 334,000 Rand. So we've raised over 2.5 million Rand already. The stock file has been in existence for just over 6 months. So yeah, and we've already invested in deals, and we're now aiming to have a property portfolio by 2024 of 250 million rand in income generating assets. And we will start investing in buildings and other such assets in 2023. And Nizo and I have gone on our own property investing journeys on our own. I'm in the process of doing other things in the Cape. I bought a flat cash in Joburg. I'm now in the process of selling it. I want to do multi-lets in the Cape. Nizo and I are also partnering to do things together. And then we've got the stock file. So things have just grown. Like, it's not like we entered the space and we were just like, we're going to go into property and this is the thing. It's just like, we were just so fascinated by property, and we started with one guest, and one guest led to another guest, led to another guest, and people really, really loved what the podcast was about, and it has grown. And now we have over 50% of our stock file members are not even South African. They're from other African countries, and they're from the US, they're from the UK, they're from Thailand, they're from everywhere. We're just like, Black and brown women that want to be part of this, come join us. We're on a mission. Our entire mission is now to change the face of real estate and what it looks like, what real estate investment looks like, to make it all about women of color. So that is our entire mission. But yeah, it did not start this loftily, right?
It's been a very long, but clearly a very fruitful journey for you, and I absolutely love it. I love that for me. I love that for your investors. And I think we're really looking, hopefully we can sit down and unpack this a little bit more in another session where we can sit down and ask you a little bit more about the property journey. I just want to go to some of the questions that the guys have been asking, because I feel like our audience has been so captive and so so good at interacting with us. It would be a shame not to answer some of their questions. So we're going to go to the first one. So Mbali actually sent us a question inside the question box, and it says, how did you come to understand the relationship between your nervous system and your relationship with money?
Let's put it this way. When you're having panic attacks around money and nobody's talking about money and panic attacks as a thing that happens, you kind of go on a journey to figure things out. So what I did was I went on a journey. I studied Vipassana meditation. And when I was at Vipassana, Vipassana is free for everyone. I just want to preface by saying that, because I feel like part of my life's mission is to spread the awesomeness of Vipassana on this planet. I am really, really, it's been one of the most life-changing things that I did for myself. So, Vipassana is a meditation that you do. You go to a center for 10 days. You take a vow of silence, no reading, no writing, no looking at your cell phone. You're just silent. You're learning to meditate, and you're feeling into your body. So they teach you how to feel into your body and feel the sensations in your body as a form of meditation, right? So for 10 days, I was just sitting there, and all I could do for 10 days was think about money. Because I went there at the height of my depression. And the reason why I went to Vipassana was I had, so trigger warning for people that are very depressed. I had decided that I was going to take my life, right? And I'd given myself like a few weeks before I did it. So I went to a tarot reader, because I'm also a tarot card reader. I come from a family that has lots of spiritual gifts, right? And when I was in my teens, my mom was told to get tarot cards for me, and that nobody should teach me how to read the tarot, that I would just figure it out because it's something that is in our bloodline. So her friend was a prophet. You guys know this stuff, you know, like black families and all that. So when she was giving my mom a reading, so this is how I ended up reading tarot at a young age. So when I was in Boston, this was also how I sustained myself in those 2 years. It was partly how I sustained myself. When I didn't make any money, I was like reading tarot for people, and I knew a lot of tarot readers. And this guy said to me, Raymond, he said, I see here that you want to end your life. Somehow the cards show that. And he said, don't do that. You're going to go to this retreat. Don't do anything before you go to this meditation retreat, and just go. I got there, and all I could see was how much every time I thought about money, my body would go into serious overdrive. So I was, and at Vipassana, nobody's talking to you. There are no lectures, you're not reading, you're not writing, you're not allowed to talk to a human soul, you're not even allowed to do sign language. So for 10 days, it's just you and you observing yourself. You can't even pat people to pass you the sugar because that's talking. So you can't sign, you can't do anything. So in those 10 days, I got some really incredible truths about myself. So when I got out of there, I was like, you know what, this has been great. I'm going to continue practicing Vipassana, which I still do 10 years later. But the most important thing for me, I said was, I am going to figure out what the heck this is about. Why is it that whenever I think about money, because in those 10 days, I wasn't managing money. I didn't have to deal with a bank statement. I didn't have to do anything, just sit and meditate for 10 days. So why was this causing me so much angst and pain to the point that by the 6th day, I threw up acid? But by day 8, I felt such incredible peace that I'd never felt and that never really left me, just this peace that everything's going to be okay. And I didn't know what the heck was happening. So I was like, I'm going to figure out what this has to do with the body, my emotional state, everything. So then I got out of there, went vegan. I was already vegetarian. I've been vegetarian since I was 16, but I was like, I'm going to take it up a notch. I went vegan. I then started practicing yoga seriously. I was already doing yoga then, but I started practicing yoga seriously, more seriously than I'd ever practiced it. I took up pranayama and I started traveling. I went back to traveling at some point, and my travels then were all about going to healers around the world. So most people have probably seen me interview many different healers where I went and I sat at the feet of various healers in different countries. I went to different countries with a very particular mission to say, I'm going to meet such and such a healer to learn about this and this. And they're going to teach me about this and how the body works. So as a result, my work does tend to be extremely intensely broad, and it takes in various methodologies, even in South Africa, right? Like my sister's a Sangoma, I learn a lot from her. So I started asking from different people. Part of also why I decided to move back home was the ancestral piece was missing. Being in the US, I was like, I only grew as far as I could. I'd worked with some Native American healers and they had helped me. But then I was like, I need to understand ancestral trauma and how we as a people carry ancestral trauma and what it means to heal ancestral trauma in the African sense, and then tailor it to me and the work that I do. So I came home and I asked my mom many questions, right? Because my mom's also a healer. She's a herbalist, but she, she digs up her own medicines as well on top of being a nurse. My family has a lot of these gifts, right? So she interprets dreams, she dreams, she does ibudlo, she has a lot of things on top of my cousins and everything. So I sat down and I started asking people and really learning from different cultures, different healers, and understanding what trauma looks like in the body and the nervous system. So so as a result, there are lots of things that people find in my work where they're like, I Googled it, I can't find it anywhere. I'm like, that's 50% of the work that I teach. You're not going to find it on Google, right? It's just not there. And I also then work with my ancestors and my guides. And I find that has been extremely helpful, especially for a lot of stuff around African vows and how things play out with black tax and family dynamics within African families.
I love that. That is such a thorough answer. I hope, Mbali, you are happy with your answer and that you were answered, right? The next question comes from Hesisi. She says, on the topic of passive relationships with money, it's become so normal. How do you identify this in yourself, and what is a healthy relationship with money?
I think you get to define what a healthy relationship with money is, right? I want to say this, that no one can ever tell you what a great relationship with money is, right? Like I've had people come to me and be like, all the money that you spend on traveling could have bought you 3 properties in a year. Yeah, it could have, but I would be unhappy. So what's the point? Like I'm happiest traveling, doing things. And yeah, it could have, but I don't think that the property stock file would have been born. I don't think that I would be even doing the things that I'm planning to do in property or that I'm already doing in property, right? So you get to define what a healthy relationship with money looks like for you, and then you get to live into it. So once you have defined that, then you get to decide to be intentional in how you make that a reality, how you act out that healthy relationship. It's the same with a romantic relationship, right? All of us are gonna, like, someone can come to me and be like, Hugh, a happy romantic relationship is where the guy comes home every night and I'm cooking and we sit down to dinner. And I can be like, Hugh,
Yeah.
please just shoot me and kill me, because that means that I would have to be in one country every day. We are going to work, we're coming back. How is that a happy romantic relationship? And when I tell someone that, for me, it's when we travel, or he does his own thing, he does his own, I do my own thing. We meet up in different countries, we do this, or sometimes we travel together, or we just live in a certain country together. And if we get bored, we can do our own thing and come back together. Someone would say, this is a disaster. Like my family looks
Yeah.
at me and just goes, lento INZ sense, but we are all very different and we will all thrive in different relationships, right? So it's the same with money. But I think what has happened over time is we have been taught, because it's money, that other people's definition of a healthy relationship with money is our definition. And then we don't understand why we can't stick to the budget, right? Why it's not working for us, because our soul is rejecting that notion of the healthy relationship with money. Our soul completely rejects it and hates it. This is why I say, when I work with clients, all my clients will tell you that people have come to me, like, I think if people listen to the Money Magic podcast, they'll hear how people have said to me, I feel like using all my salary on getting this really luxurious apartment. What do you think? I'm like, what does your soul think? And if someone, and they like, my soul says this is good, then I'm like, great, go for it. And
I
then,
know
like,
what you
people have shared how from making that one decision, their whole lives have changed and they even made more money. Why? Because there's also a thing called, like, there's a soul. You're also spirit led and spirit guided. So I do not know what your spirit is leading you to do. I don't know what your ancestors are leading you to do. So I don't know what a healthy relationship with money, to all these factors that have to do with you, looks like. Only you will ever know that.
Love that. Love that. It's a personal relationship that you create and curate yourself based on the work that you will do. And that is inner work. I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Tando asked quite a few questions around additional income and entrepreneurship, but I think we covered a lot of those questions.
Yeah.
We're going to skip that and go to Shange, who then asked that, speaking of budgeting, should one do away with financial literacy? That is savings, risks cover,
No.
tax.
No, not at all. I just shared that I have a financial advisor and she's done the Lord's work with me, right? I just shared that, like, we have a Property Magicians podcast where we talk about the practical aspects of property, refinancing, all that. All
Yeah.
that, right? So I think we live in a world where we've been taught that things are simple, that things are it's either or. And I want us to start moving away from that and having and conversations. This
Love
is what
it.
I tell all my clients, is that, is it possible that in the midst of all this, financial literacy also coexists with the fact that, oh, I am healing my money trauma, and what my spirit of money is telling me is that I should go and invest in shares. So obviously, if I'm going to go invest in shares, then I probably should. Sorry, someone was texting me. If I'm going to invest in shares, then I should probably go learn something about the stock market and share investing, right? So that the spirit can lead you, and your ancestors can even have an insight into that and guide you, and the
Yeah.
soul can have guidance. But we live in the earthly plane, so we need to know earthly rules. So then you go and you go learn about earthly stuff. right? So
Mhm.
like I am having to learn about property. I didn't just decide I'm going to do this cash. I went and I learned and I was like, oh, okay. I tried different strategies. I tried different things and I was like, this is what works for me. So I did the property education. I made lots of mistakes along the way, but I was also learning the practical stuff. So
Yeah.
financial literacy is important because you're going to have to learn about what risk cover is, right? And then you're going to go
Mm.
back and say, is this life insurance, does it pertain to my situation and what I'm trying to achieve, to my
Yeah.
vision? Oh, okay. Someone told me about endowments. Someone told me about unit trust. Someone told me about cryptocurrency, all these things. You go, you read up on them, you're like, does this work? Is this in tandem with what my soul is trying to achieve? Or does it feel right when I sit down and I
Mm.
work with it and I do my work and my inner work? Is this in line with the life that I want to create and with the vision that I want? So this is exactly, for me, I think that these things exist in tandem because this is how I've been working with my financial advisor, right? In fact, this is how we should all be approaching. Not we should, I don't like to use the word should, but I think this is a great way. Let me say
Yeah.
my opinion, right? There is no shoulds because we're all very different, but I think it's a great idea to sit down and figure out what it is that you truly want. Not what your
Yeah.
mother wants, not what your boss tells you you should want, not what your dad
Mhm.
says you should want, not what your husband, your boyfriend, all these people say that they want. What is it that you want? And then
Yeah.
start seeing if the actions that you're taking financially, the way you're saving, you're investing, everything, is it in alignment with what you want? Is it in alignment with the values that you are wanting to express as an individual in this world, right? And then start building your investment portfolio and start saving accordingly, right? That is the
Yeah.
important thing, is what do you want? And then are you living in alignment to what you say you want? And are your
Mhm.
finances aligning to that? And then the financial literacy element will all come into that, because it also doesn't help to be all over the place. You know, that
Yeah.
you learn about property, you're learning all the strategies of property, and you want to do it all. That's a recipe for disaster also, right? So
Mhm.
really knowing yourself and understanding yourself, because what I've learned on this journey is it's important to know what to say no to and what to say yes to. I say no to a heck of a lot of things. I say no to a lot of things. And even with the property podcast, Nisa and I have said no to so many things. And years ago, like I think maybe in 2020, people were like, how you guys ever going to monetize? How's this ever going to make sense? But now as people see why we said no, it makes sense why we said
Mm.
no to those things, so that we could say yes to what we're saying yes to now. I think
Mm.
that's so important when it comes to personal finance.
Mm, Love that. Life with Mbali says alignment with exclamation marks, because that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Ensuring that you align your values with your
yeah.
money and your spirit and your body. And Kay Gumbi says that they love how all of this covers the mind, the body, and the soul. And I think that's a lot of what is being echoed by a lot of the guys on the live today, that we're so grateful that you have covered an all-encompassing view of what mastering your money and mastering your personal finances can look like. Vangile, thank
Mm.
you so much. We're actually a whole 30 minutes over.
I
Thank you
know.
for yeah, I know. It was such an incredible conversation. Didn't even feel like it.
Yeah.
But thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your words of wisdom and your guidance. I'm sure there will be other questions. I hope we can invite you for more questions. If you really want to unpack more of the property conversation, me in particular.
Awesome.
So I think, for now, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everybody that has stayed on and watched and interacted with us and ensured that they were asking questions, interacted with each other. It's
Mm.
been a lovely, lovely, lovely evening. I don't know if you have any closing words for everybody.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, you guys. So many of you have stayed. You stayed for
Mm.
so long with us. I deeply appreciate it. And I know people are constantly asking where I talk about these things. I talk about them on the on the Money Magic podcast. So all this work that I talk about when it comes to trauma, money, healing, how to work with your budget, everything. So I cover the practical, the spiritual, the emotional, the nervous system, etc. Definitely check out the Money Magic podcast. You can find that on YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, and iTunes. Go check out the Money Magic podcast, share the podcast, send me questions, show love. And yeah, definitely. I also share a lot. If you go on my Instagram profile, you'll see that like I write a lot. Obviously, on the podcast, I'm spending like an hour to 90 minutes unpacking. I also invite my clients and other healers that have impacted me to come on the podcast, and we further unpack some incredible stuff. So I talk about my Tantra journey, everything. So definitely join me on there, and yeah, join me on my Instagram profile as well. Thank you for today. I genuinely had fun with this. And yeah, I wanted to say I do have a free resource, which is the 7-day tapping into ancestral 7-day training using ancestral money wisdom, tapping into ancestral money wisdom, or something like that. And you guys can check it out at wealthy-money.com/training. So you can sign up for that again at wealthy-money.com/training. Thank you so much, Ntavi. Thank you, Mbali, for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Lulu. Thank you to everyone at Traversing Liminality. I've enjoyed this so much.
It has been absolutely phenomenal. Like, you can even see the messages are still coming in. It's just hearts everywhere. So let's save the live. I've gotten many instructions. Save the live. I'm going to save the live.
Please.
See, now I've got to try not to like ruin this.
I think you save the live after we get off the live. I think
so
that's
press
the
the
thing.
little X at the top and then it'll pop up, hey.
Yes, and it will ask you if you want to put this on IGTV, or I think you want to download it. So I think it will ask the two. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Have a fantastic evening further. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.